When I look back on it now, that night feels like a dividing line between the kind of innocence you don't realize you have and the kind of fear you never shake. I was 15, just old enough to feel grown but still young enough to believe. The world couldn't touch me. My name is Emma, and it was my house where it all happened. An old two-story in the kind of quiet suburban neighborhood where nothing ever seemed to go wrong. The kind of place where porch lights glowed like safety beacons and neighbors waved when you biked by. It was Friday night, the first weekend after midterms, and for us girls it meant freedom. My parents had gone out of town for a wedding, leaving me with a house to myself. Technically, my older brother was supposed to keep an eye on me, but he had his own plans, the kind that didn't involve babysitting his little sister and her friends. He promised he'd be home before midnight. He wasn't. Chloe was the loud one, always daring someone to do something dumb. Sarah was the jokester, quick with a laugh that could diffuse any tension. And Mia, she was my best friend since third grade, cautious most of the time but unable to resist proving she wasn't afraid when someone challenged her. The four of us dragged sleeping bags into the living room, stacked empty pizza boxes on the coffee table, and painted each other's nails while a slasher movie flickered on the TV. The house smelled like nail polish remover and pepperoni grease, and the glow of the screen painted us in pale blues and reds. We talked over the movie more than we watched it, laughing about how fake the blood looked or how stupid the characters were for running upstairs when everyone knows that's the worst move. At one point, Sarah suggested we play truth or dare, and that was where the whole night started sliding sideways. Chloe dared Mia to go onto the porch and yell something into the street. "Make it good," Chloe pressed. "Something that'll freak out the neighbors." Mia groaned but pushed up from her blanket. She went barefoot, giggling as she pulled open the front door. I remember the cold air spilling in, the quiet of the neighborhood at 11:30 at night. Then she cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted, "Come get us," before bolting back inside like she'd just set off fireworks. We collapsed into laughter, slamming the door and locking it, cheeks hot with adrenaline. It felt harmless, just another stupid dare in a night full of them. But sometimes, one little thing sets off a chain you can't stop. By midnight, we were restless. The movie ended, the room dim except for the lamp. We lay in our sleeping bags, trading whispers and scrolling through our phones. That's when I heard it. Soft, almost polite. A tap at the front window. I froze. "Did you guys hear that?" "Probably the wind," Sarah muttered, not looking up. But then it came again. Tap, tap. Mia's phone light caught Chloe's face. She looked pale. "Wait, wasn't the porch light off?" I turned toward the curtains. A faint glow seeped around the edges. My parents always left the bulb burned out to save electricity, but now it glowed steady, yellow against the night, and behind it I swore I saw movement, a shadow stretching tall across the glass. Mia yanked the curtain aside for a split second. Her scream pierced the room. Someone ducked out of sight. We scrambled, locking every door and window we could reach. The house suddenly unfamiliar and hostile, and then from the back of the house another knock. "Call your brother," Chloe hissed. My hands shook as I fumbled for my phone. The line rang, and when he answered, his voice was groggy. "I can't come now," he said. "I'm 20 minutes out. Just stay inside, lock the doors, don't do anything stupid." It was supposed to be reassuring, but it wasn't. We were 4 girls alone in a house that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. We killed the TV, leaving only the lamplight, which flickered like it couldn't decide whether to help us or betray us. Then the power went out. The lamp died. The fridge hummed to silence and the house sank into darkness. The sudden quiet was worse than the noise. My chest felt hollow, and the only light came from the 4 of us scrambling for our phones, their cold glow making us look like ghosts. "Maybe it's just the breaker," Sarah said weakly, but even she didn't sound convinced. "What if he's inside?" Mia whispered, voice tight. "Don't say that," I snapped, though the thought had already lodged itself in my head. Every creak in the floor, every sigh of the house settling felt like footsteps. We decided to move upstairs together, as if height could keep us safe. We tiptoed, clutching our phones like lanterns. Just as we reached the landing, the sound came, Again, footsteps on the porch. Slow, deliberate, like whoever it was knew we were listening. We locked my bedroom door and pressed against it as if our bodies alone could hold back what waited outside. "Do we call 911?" I whispered. Chloe shook her head. "What if it's nothing? What if it's like some dumb neighbor messing around? We'll look crazy." But then we saw it. From the crack under the door, a faint glow, light sweeping. Across the hallway wall, a flashlight beam. "Who's there?" Chloe yelled, her voice breaking. The beam clicked off. That was enough. I dialed 911, my thumb slipping on the screen. When the dispatcher's calm voice answered, I whispered everything: the taps, the shadow, the flashlight. She told us to stay quiet, stay locked in, and that officers were on the way. Minutes stretched into hours. Every sound felt amplified: the scrape of something against the siding, the groan of the house, the distant slam of a trash can. My heart kept time with the silence. Then finally, faint but growing, sirens. Red and blue light spilled across my curtains, painting the room in pulsing color. Relief rushed through me so fast it made me dizzy. When the officers knocked and announced themselves, we stumbled down the stairs, clinging to each other. The house looked normal, too normal. The officers spread out across the yard with flashlights, their radios crackling. "Stay together," one of them said firmly. I hovered by the doorway, my pulse still hammering. A younger officer walked toward the side yard. His light cut across the grass, then froze. "Boot prints," he called out. They were fresh, pressed deep into the mud from the rain earlier that week. A path of them led around the house, circling it like someone had been pacing, watching. My stomach turned when the prints stopped right beneath the window where we'd been lying earlier. Then came the shout. "Back here!" We followed the beams toward the neighbor's shed. A man crouched in the shadows, tools scattered beside him, screwdrivers, pliers, a crowbar. He looked up as the officers closed in, his face half hidden beneath a hood. Hands where I can see them. He didn't run. He just stood slowly, like he'd been waiting to be caught. They cuffed him and led him past us. His eyes flicked up just once, locking on mine. I'll never forget that look. Calm, almost amused, like the night had been a game to him. One officer pulled my mom's number from me and made the call. By the time my parents rushed home, pale and trembling, the man was already gone in the back of a cruiser. The police told us he'd been carrying tools to pry open doors. He hadn't broken in yet, but he'd been planning to. That night, none of us slept. We sat in a circle in the living room, whispering about every sound until dawn. The days after blurred. At school, we stuck together like glue. Everyone had heard rumors. Someone said the guy was a drifter. Someone else said he'd been spotted weeks before hanging around the park. Nobody really knew. I couldn't stop thinking about the dare. About Mia standing barefoot on the porch, shouting into the dark, "Come get us." It haunted me, like we'd summoned something. Chloe tried to brush it off, saying it was just coincidence, but even she had dark circles under her eyes. At night, I couldn't stand my room. The window felt too exposed. I started sleeping on the couch with the TV on low, the light and noise wrapping me like armor. Mia confessed she couldn't step outside alone after dark. Chloe admitted she dreamed about the flashlight beam sliding across the wall. Sarah, who used to laugh the loudest at scary movies, now flinched at shadows. One afternoon, my mom sat me down. "You girls did the right thing," she said softly. "You called. You didn't open the door. That's what saved you." But her voice carried a weight that told me the truth. What haunted her was what could have happened. Weeks passed and life settled, at least on the surface. Homework piled up, basketball season started, and new gossip replaced the old. But beneath it, that night lived on in us. Sometimes when I walked home after school, I felt it. The prickling on the back of my neck, like someone was just out of sight. I checked locks obsessively, pulled curtains tight, and never slept without a light on. The four of us drifted like people do, but whenever we got together, it always came up. We'd laugh nervously, call it the knock at the window, pretend it was a campfire story, but the laughter never lasted long. The truth is, that night broke something in us. It showed us how thin the wall between safety and danger really is, how fast innocence can turn to fear. Even now, years later, I can still hear it sometimes, the faint, polite tap at the window, the sound that changed everything. What happened to us was more than just a frightening story. It was a lesson carved deep. Never take safety for granted, and never ignore the small warnings that something isn't right. Fear isn't weakness, it's instinct, and sometimes it's the only thing standing between you and danger. Innocence fades, but awareness can keep you alive. The summer of 2016 still lingers in my memory like a ghost that never quite left. I was 12 years old, living in a quiet suburb outside Madison, Wisconsin. Back then, life felt simple. Bike rides to the gas station for slushies, baseball, in the street until the sun dipped low, and weekends spent running around with my two best friends, Liam and Noah. Our little world revolved around each other, and we thought we were invincible. My family lived at the end of Willow Lane, a cul-de-sac where kids drew chalk across driveways and parents waved to each other over grills. Behind our backyard stretched a small patch of woods. It wasn't big, just a tangle of maple and oak trees with a path worn by kids daring each other to run through at night. But to us it felt endless, dark, and alive. We told stories about what might be hiding there. Foxes, drifters, ghosts. That July, just before my little sister's birthday party, I begged my parents to let me camp out back with Liam and Noah. We had been talking about it for weeks, swearing we were old enough to handle it. My mom hesitated, but my dad just laughed. "Just don't scream loud enough to wake the neighborhood," he said as he helped us pitch the green nylon tent near the edge of the yard. We set it up like a scene from a movie. Sleeping bags, flashlights, bags of Doritos, and my iPad so we could watch YouTube videos until we passed out. It felt like freedom. No parents hovering, no rules. Just three 12-year-olds whispering under the stars. At first, it was perfect. We played cards under the glow of a lantern, the air thick with bug spray and summer heat. We told stories about baseball tryouts, the kids at school we couldn't stand, and which YouTubers we thought were the funniest. By 11, our voices lowered, and we switched to ghost stories. Noah, always the dramatic one, leaned close and whispered about the Watcher, some old man who supposedly haunted the woods after vanishing in the 1970s. Liam rolled his eyes and called it stupid, but I noticed how often he glanced at the dark tree line. I laughed along with them, but inside I wasn't so brave. The woods had always unsettled me, especially at night. I distracted myself by checking my glow-in-the-dark watch every few minutes. Midnight, then 1. We were tired, but none of us wanted to be the first to admit it. It wasn't until after 2 that the night shifted. I unzipped the flap just a little to let in air. The yard was so quiet it didn't sound real. No crickets, no wind, nothing. My eyes drifted toward the trees, and that's when I saw it. A pale face, motionless, half hidden among the branches, eyes fixed directly on me. For a second it didn't move at all, like a mask nailed to a tree. My heart jumped into my throat. Then it blinked. I screamed. "What? What is it?" Liam asked, sitting bolt upright. Someone's out there." My voice cracked, my hand shaking so hard I dropped the zipper. Noah scrambled over, pressing his face to the thin tent. Fabric, but there was nothing, just shadows. "Dude, you're freaking us out," Liam muttered, trying to sound steady, though his knuckles were white around the baseball bat he'd insisted on bringing. Then it came, a sound no one could laugh off. Snap, a twig breaking, then another. Slow, deliberate. We froze, listening. The nylon walls of the tent trembled as if something brushed a hand against them. Noah's eyes went wide. "That's not a raccoon." My heart hammered. I grabbed my flashlight, but when I flicked it on, the beam sputtered once and died. The batteries were fresh. Liam hissed, "No way." Outside, the footsteps circled us. Each crunch in the grass made the tent feel smaller, thinner, like tissue paper. Then came the creak of the old wooden gate at the back of the yard. Someone was opening it. "This isn't funny anymore," Noah whispered, his voice high and tight. "We need to go inside," I stammered. We unzipped the flap in a burst of panic and bolted barefoot across the grass. My lungs burned, adrenaline roaring in my ears. We slammed the back door, twisted the lock, and collapsed against it. The noise woke my parents instantly. My dad stormed into the kitchen, flashlight in hand. "What the hell's going on?" "There's someone out there," I gasped. "By the woods." His expression hardened. "Stay here." We pressed our faces to the window as he stepped into the yard, the beam of his flashlight sweeping across the grass. For a moment, the world went silent again. Then he stopped. His shoulders stiffened. Minutes later, he came back in, his face pale. "Go upstairs. Now." We didn't argue. We ran up the stairs, hearts still racing, and huddled in my room. Through the crack in the curtains, I watched as my dad stood at the back door, phone pressed to his ear. When he came up later, he didn't sugarcoat it. There were footprints, boots, someone walked around your tent. My stomach dropped. "So it wasn't just—" "No," he cut me off. "You weren't imagining it." The police arrived 20 minutes later. Their flashlights swept the yard, their voices carrying through the still night. One officer knelt in the mud, pointing at the prints that circled the tent, then disappeared into the woods. Another came to the porch and told us, "Probably just a drifter passing through. We'll keep an eye out." But I saw his face. He didn't believe it was that simple. When they left, the house felt heavy with silence. None of us could sleep. We sat in a row on the floor of my room, whispering. Liam, who usually made jokes, didn't say much. Noah muttered over and over that he knew the woods were haunted. Hours passed, but dawn never felt farther away. Every creak in the house made me jump. Every time a car passed on the street, I held my breath. By sunrise, I felt older somehow, as if one night had pushed me years ahead. The next morning, balloons swayed on our mailbox and the smell of cake filled the kitchen. My sister's birthday went on like nothing had happened, but for me, the yard looked different. Smaller yet darker somehow. While kids ran around chasing each other with party hats, I slipped outside. The tent still sat near the woods, the nylon, damp with dew. I crouched down, tracing the footprints the police had missed. They circled the tent over and over, close enough that whoever it was could have touched us. Then I saw it. On the outside wall of the tent, right where my head had been when I peeked out, smudged in dirt, a handprint. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. It wasn't small either. It was wide, the fingers spread like someone had pressed against the fabric, waiting. I didn't tell my parents right away. I wasn't sure I could. But when I finally whispered it to Liam and Noah, their faces drained. Noah shook his head, muttering, "I told you. The Watcher." Liam didn't joke after that. Time dulled the sharpness of that night, but it never erased it. The police never found anyone. They said it was probably just a transient, someone cutting through the neighborhood. My dad tried to believe it. My mom wouldn't let us camp outside again. But for me, the image of that pale face at the tree line never faded. It wasn't surprised when I saw it. It wasn't startled. It looked like it had been waiting. Liam stopped teasing about ghost stories. Noah admitted he had nightmares for years. And me, I never camped outside again, not even as a teenager. Years later, when I drove past that old house, the woods looked smaller, almost harmless. But the fear inside me didn't shrink. Some things stay with you, because once you've looked into the dark and seen it looking back, you don't forget. Danger doesn't always come crashing loudly. Sometimes it waits quietly, watching, until you notice it. We learn to trust our instincts not because they make us brave, but because they might keep us alive. Fear in the right moment is wisdom. Looking back, I always think of that night in November as the last time I felt truly safe in my own house. I was 14, just a freshman in high school, and all I wanted for my birthday was to have a sleepover with my closest friends. Nothing fancy, just cake, junk food, TikToks, and the kind of laughter that makes your stomach hurt. My parents were exhausted from decorating all day, and by the time the party wound down, they went upstairs to bed without much fuss. My little brother was already out cold, which was fine by me. He had a habit of barging into my room whenever I had people over, so it was just us girls, me, Olivia, Harper, Avery, and Sophie. We spread sleeping bags and blankets all across my bedroom floor until you could barely see the carpet. Candy wrappers, nail polish bottles, and half-empty soda cans littered the space between us. We were buzzing on sugar and the thrill of being 14, free from parents for the night. Olivia lived across the street, so she knew my house as well as I did. Harper was the fearless one, though she was a year older and liked to act tougher than she was. Avery, the youngest, still had braces and a nervous laugh that gave her away any time she was scared. And Sophie was the quiet one, sweet but jumpy, always glancing over her shoulder when we told scary stories. Around midnight, after hours of TikToks and gossip, the Wi-Fi cut out. Just like that. Gone. It wasn't unusual. My dad always complained about how spotty our router was, but in the moment it felt like a tragedy. Ugh, not again, I groaned, shaking my phone like that would make the bars come back. Maybe your router's haunted, Olivia teased, earning a laugh from Harper. With nothing left to scroll, Harper suggested ghost stories. At first, it was harmless fun. Bloody Mary, Ouija boards, the usual sleepover material. But as the minutes dragged on, the energy shifted. Our voices got quieter. The shadows in the corners seemed heavier. And that's when Avery, who was sitting closest to the door, whispered, "Do you guys see that?" We all turned. A thin beam of light, like a phone flashlight, was moving slowly down the hallway. "Must be your mom," Sophie said quickly, but her voice wavered. "My mom doesn't use her phone flashlight," I said. "She doesn't even know how." To prove it, I grabbed my phone and called her. From the parents' bedroom at the end of the hall came the muffled sound of her ringtone. She didn't answer. We stared at each other, wide-eyed. Then the light in the hallway blinked off and everything went dark again. "Lock the door," Harper hissed. My hands shook as I slid the latch into place. For a long moment, none of us moved. Every creak in the house seemed magnified. Sophie whispered, "What if someone got inside?" "Don't say that," I snapped, though my throat felt tight. Olivia tried to sound calm. "It's fine. Houses make noises, it's just settling." But she didn't sound convinced. That's when we heard it. Creak, pause, creak, footsteps. On the stairs, slow, heavy, deliberate. Someone was coming up, one step at a time. Avery pressed her face into a pillow and sobbed quietly. Harper grabbed the lamp from my nightstand, clutching it like a weapon. I held my phone so tightly my hand ached. "I'm calling 911, I whispered. The dispatcher's voice was calm, too calm. "Stay on the line. Officers are on their way." But every second felt stretched, unbearable. Outside the door, the floorboards groaned. It sounded like someone was right there, just inches from us, breathing, waiting, and then nothing. Silence. We sat in that silence for what felt like hours, our ears straining for the smallest sound. My hand was slick with sweat around my phone, and I kept whispering into it, begging the dispatcher to hurry the police. Harper had her jaw set tight, but her knuckles were white around the lamp's base. Sophie mouthed a prayer. Olivia squeezed Avery's shoulder, trying to keep her from crying out loud. Then, faint at first, the sound of sirens reached us. A flood of relief hit me so hard my knees almost buckled. Blue and red lights flashed against my bedroom window, cutting the darkness into pieces. A firm knock came at the front door. My dad answered, groggy and confused. "What's going on?" he barked. But when he saw the officers, his tone softened into something closer to fear. We filed into the hallway, shaky and pale. The cops fanned out, checking the downstairs. Moment later, one called up, "Sir, you'd better come see this." In the kitchen, the back door hung slightly open. The wood around the frame was splintered, pried apart by a crowbar. Muddy boot prints tracked across the tile down the hall, stopping right outside my bedroom door. Looks like whoever it was left when they heard us, one officer said grimly. My dad turned to me, his face ashen. You girls stayed in that room? I nodded. My stomach twisted. If we hadn't locked the door? The officer shook his head. You were lucky. Very lucky. While the police searched the house, we were gathered in the living room. My mom wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, but it didn't stop me from shaking. Avery refused to let go of Sophie's hand. Olivia's eyes darted to every window as if expecting someone to appear there. Harper sat with her arms crossed, staring at the floor. Her tough mask cracked. An officer returned, holding something in his gloved hand. Found this on the counter. It was a cell phone. Old, cracked screen, but the flashlight still glowed faintly. Battery almost drained. My mom gasped. That's not ours. The officer nodded. It isn't. Whoever broke and left it behind. The girls all looked at me. I swallowed hard. That was the light we saw. Someone had been walking through our house, holding that phone, watching us. The realization settled in like ice water through my veins. It wasn't random. They hadn't wanted money. They hadn't touched the TV or the jewelry box on the counter. They'd gone straight down the hall right to my room. The thought made my stomach churn. They knew we were there. The police stayed until dawn, but by then, none of us had slept. When the sun finally rose, its light felt too thin, like it couldn't chase away the night. My friends called their parents to pick them up early. One by one they left, each of them pale and shaken. That was the last sleepover we ever had at my house. Harper started sleeping with her door locked, no exceptions. Sophie began checking every window before bed. Olivia had panic attacks anytime the Wi-Fi went down. Avery refused to go to another sleepover for more than a year. And me, I carried the heaviest part. I couldn't stop replaying the moment I saw the flashlight in the hallway. I couldn't stop thinking about the boot prints outside my door. Years later in college, I wrote about it in my journal. Not the police, not the broken door, not even the cell phone left behind haunted me the most. What haunted me was knowing someone had stood there, breathing outside my door, listening to us whisper, waiting. They hadn't wanted money. They had wanted us. Sometimes the greatest danger isn't the noise outside. It's the silence right beside you. Fear isn't weakness. It's warning. When your instincts scream that something is wrong, you have to listen because ignoring them might be the last mistake you make. I used to think my childhood street was the safest place on earth. It was one of those cookie-cutter neighborhoods built in the early 2000s, where every driveway had a basketball hoop, every backyard smelled like barbecue in the summer, and everyone left their bikes sprawled on the grass without worrying someone would take them. My house sat smack in the middle of the cul-de-sac, and from my bedroom window, I could see just about everything. I knew which neighbors had the best Halloween candy, which dads mowed their lawns in crooked lines, and which porch lights stayed on long after midnight. But there was always one exception. Directly across from my house stood the old place nobody wanted to talk about. Its shutters drooped, the siding peeled away in long strips, and the lawn was nothing but dirt and weeds. When I was younger, I used to imagine a monster lived inside, crouched by the upstairs window with glowing eyes. My mom told me not to make up stories, said the house was condemned, like that word explained anything. Kids whispered about the family who once lived there, about how they sat down for dinner one night and never finished. The dishes stayed on the table, the TV kept flickering, the lights burned all night, but the people were gone. Just gone. By the time I was 12, I'd stopped believing in monsters, but that house still gave me chills. So when Brandon, the new kid from school, dared us to sneak inside during a sleepover, I should have known better than to go along. It was one of those long summer nights when the air is heavy and everything smells faintly like cut grass. Jake's basement had become our headquarters, just like always. His parents worked late shifts at the hospital, and his little sister stayed upstairs glued to cartoons, so we had free reign. We'd played Mario Kart until our thumbs were sore, eaten way too many sour gummies, and half-watched some slasher movie that turned out to be more dumb than scary. It was Brandon who broke the lull. He leaned against the narrow basement window, peering out at the house across the street. "You guys ever been in there?" Lucas snorted without looking up from his controller. "Nobody's been in there since, like, the 90s. "Exactly," Brandon said, smirking. "Which makes it the perfect spot for a dare. Come on. You can't tell me you're not curious." Mia hugged a pillow to her chest. She always tried to act braver than she was, but her voice cracked. "I heard the cops found food still on the table, like they just vanished mid-bite. That's not normal." "Neither is you believing everything you hear," Jake shot back, though even he didn't sound convinced. I remember glancing at Zoe, Mia's twin, who was quieter but sharper. She didn't speak right away. She just stared at the boarded-up windows like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Then she said softly, "What if someone's still in there?" The room went still. The thought hadn't really crossed my mind before. Someone, not something. But once she said it, I couldn't shake it. Brandon grinned like he'd won. "All the more reason to check it out, unless you're all too chicken." The way he said it, half mocking, half challenging, dug under my skin. I didn't want him to think I was scared. None of us did, and that's the problem with dares. They always start with pride, never common sense. Within 15 minutes, we were slipping out Jake's back door, hoodies pulled up, phones clutched like weapons. The neighborhood was silent, except for the buzz of a flickering streetlight. Every step toward that house felt like crossing into somewhere we didn't belong. I remember the sound most of all. The front door gave a long, aching groan when it opened, like it had been waiting years just for us. We went inside. The air hit me first. Stale, sour, thick with mildew. It was the kind of smell that settled into your clothes and didn't wash out. The floor was littered with broken glass and crumpled papers. Every footstep echoed too loudly, like the house wasn't just empty, but hollow, hungry. The living room looked frozen in time. A couch sat under a sheet thick with dust, and above it hung a family portrait. The faces were faded, but you could still make out the smiles. Mom, Dad, 2 kids, all lined up stiffly. Only someone had gouged the eyes out with something sharp. "Okay, that's officially creepy," Zoe whispered. "Creepy but fake," Brandon shot back, though his voice wasn't steady anymore. Probably just teenagers messing around years ago. We drifted deeper into the house, our phone flashlights carving narrow tunnels of light through the dark. The kitchen table still had plates on it, crusted with mold. Silverware lay scattered like someone had gotten up mid-bite and never returned. A wall clock hung lopsided above the sink, its hands forever frozen at 3:17. "Why that time?" Maya asked. Nobody answered. When we reached the staircase, Mia stopped dead. "No way, I'm not going up there." Jake rolled his eyes. "Then wait here." So she did, hovering by the front door with her arms crossed tight over her chest while the rest of us climbed. Each step moaned under our weight, like the house was warning us back. The master bedroom looked almost normal at first. The bed was neatly made, though the sheets had yellowed with age. A dresser stood against the far wall, a cracked mirror hanging above it. I walked closer, shining my light, and that's when I saw it. "Dude, is that fog?" Lucas muttered. Our breath clouded in the glass, white puffs blooming against the surface. But the air around us wasn't cold. The mirror rippled, just slightly, like water. "Hell no," I whispered, backing away. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. All 4 of us bolted from the room, crashing back down the stairs 2 at a time. When we reached the bottom, Mia was standing at the window, her face pale. "Someone's outside," she whispered. Sure enough, through the smeared glass, a figure stood under the streetlight, perfectly still, watching. At first, Jake tried to reason it out. Maybe it's just a neighbor, or a drunk guy. At 1 in the morning, standing dead still in the yard, Mia shot back, her voice sharp with panic. I pressed closer to the glass, but the light made it impossible to see a face. Just a silhouette, motionless. too still to be normal. "Okay," I whispered. "Everyone relax. We'll just leave quietly." That's when Zoe spoke up, her tone flat, almost detached. "Where's Brandon?" We all turned. He was gone. None of us had heard him leave. His flashlight beam was nowhere to be seen. The panic in my chest spiked. "Brandon," Jake hissed. No reply. We fanned out, calling his name. Our voices bounced down the empty hallway, up the creaking stairs, swallowed by the house. Then it came. The sound. A lullaby, soft, almost gentle, drifting from upstairs. "Brandon, I swear to God if this is a joke." Jake started, but his voice cracked. We followed the sound, against every ounce of reason. My legs felt like lead, but the song pulled us. The twins clung to each other. In the nursery, the wallpaper peeled in long yellowed strips. A rocking chair creaked back and forth, though no one sat in it. On the floor, half hidden in shadow, crouched Brandon. He rocked with it, his hands clamped over his ears. "Don't listen," he whispered, his voice jagged. "She's not real. Don't listen." Before we could reach him, every flashlight blinked out at once. The darkness was suffocating, like a weight pressing in. Somewhere above us, something skittered fast across the ceiling, too fast, too heavy to be a rat. The lullaby twisted into sharp, jagged laughter. "Run!" Jake yelled. We grabbed Brandon by the arms, hauling him upright, and tore out of the room. The rocking chair slammed against the wall with a deafening crack as we fled. The stairs groaned. The floor splintered under our sneakers, but we didn't stop until we burst through the front door. The night air hit us like a slap. The figure under the streetlight flickered, there 1 second, gone the next. We sprinted across the street, lungs burning, until Jake's house loomed in front of us. We slammed the door shut, bolted it, and collapsed. In the basement, gasping for air, nobody spoke. Nobody dared. Brandon sat with his knees pulled to his chest, muttering over and over. "The woman upstairs, she's been waiting." We didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the house sent us jolting upright. When dawn finally broke, pale and gray, I thought maybe we'd survived it, that maybe we could forget. But when I woke from a brief, uneasy doze, Brandon was gone. His sleeping bag lay flat, his shoes neatly by the wall. No note, no sound of the door, just gone. The cops came, of course. They questioned all of us, wrote notes in their little books, nodded in ways that made it clear they didn't believe a word. They searched the house across the street, said it was empty, abandoned, nothing unusual. Brandon's parents cried. His picture went up on flyers stapled to every lamppost. His name ran across the local news. But no trace of him was ever found. We grew up. Life pulled us apart like it does. Jake moved away after high school. The twins stopped talking to each other after a bad fight, and Lucas joined the army. I stayed, though, and I still live on that street. The house is still there, still boarded up, still sagging under the weight of its own silence. Most people pass it without looking, but sometimes when I drive by late at night, the curtains twitch, like someone knows I'm watching. And then there are the calls. Always late, always from blocked numbers. When I pick up, it's never a voice, just a faint lullaby drifting through the static. I tell myself it's a prank, some cruel joke. But deep down I know, she's still there. And so is Brandon. We thought we were invincible, that nothing bad could happen in our safe little neighborhood. But curiosity mixed with pride can be dangerous, especially when it blinds you to real risks. Not every dare is worth taking, and not every mystery needs solving. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. I grew up in the kind of neighborhood where nothing ever really happened. The kind of place where the most exciting thing was when the ice cream truck came rolling down the street in July, or when the city finally fixed the pothole at the end of the cul-de-sac. Parents let kids run wild until dark because everyone trusted everyone else. The lawns were all cut short, the porches all had faded rocking chairs, and the streetlights hummed to life at exactly 8:15 every night. It was safe, or at least I thought it was. Back then, Jake's house was the spot for sleepovers. His parents worked hospital shifts, so the rules were always looser there. He had a big living room, a decent flat screen, and parents who stocked the freezer with frozen pizzas like they knew a pack of 12-year-old boys was going to descend on the place every weekend. That particular Friday night, it was me, Jake, Marcus, Owen, and Sam. We were 12, almost 13, which meant we were convinced we were older than we really were. Staying up past midnight felt like rebellion. Drinking 3 cans of Mountain Dew in a row felt like a rite of passage. We piled into sleeping bags, controllers scattered on the rug, half-empty soda cans sweating rings onto the carpet. The smell of pepperoni pizza clung to the air even though the boxes were stacked empty, in the corner. We'd just finished a round of video games and were half-heartedly arguing about which movie to stream, when Marcus said, "I'm craving Sour Patch. Let's just go to the corner store. I'll pay." We all looked at Jake. His parents were upstairs asleep. He shifted nervously. "We're not supposed to leave the house," Marcus smirked. "It's literally a 10-minute walk. What's the worst that could happen?" It was the way he said it, like a challenge. Sneaking out felt like the kind of thing you had to do at a sleepover, something you'd talk about later, brag about. So we all pulled on hoodies, grabbed flashlights, and slipped out the sliding back door like we were breaking some great law. The air was cool, crickets humming in the distance. The streets were darker than I remembered, but the sugar buzz and adrenaline made us bold. We walked loud, laughing too much, our sneakers slapping the pavement. Every passing car's headlights made us jump, but we laughed it off. By the time we got to the store, we were giddy. We pooled our crumpled bills, bought armfuls of candy and chips, and started back down the familiar route, plastic bags rustling at our sides. That's when Marcus suggested a shortcut. "Cedar Street's faster," he said, pointing down the block. Cedar was quieter, older, bigger yards, fewer streetlights. It had a different feel, heavier somehow, but we were 12 and faster sounded good. We turned onto it, sneakers scuffing cracked pavement, whispering now without really knowing why. That's when we saw the house. It looked abandoned, the kind of place kids dared each other to knock on. The yard was overgrown, the blinds shut tight, the porch light busted. Owen grinned, eyes glinting. "Bet nobody lives here." Before any of us could stop him, he jogged diagonally across the lawn. "Dude, don't," Jake hissed. That's when the porch light snapped on. The door creaked open. A tall figure filled the doorway, shoulders broad, face hidden in shadow. He didn't yell. He didn't ask what we were doing. He just stood there, framed in yellow light, watching. My stomach dropped. "Run," I whispered. And we did. We tore down the street like our lives depended on it, sneakers slapping pavement, candy bags bouncing against our sides. My chest burned, my breath came in ragged gasps, but I didn't dare look back until we collapsed under the glow of a street lamp a block away. Holy crap," Tyler wheezed. "He's still watching." I turned, and sure enough, the man was still in the doorway. He hadn't moved, hadn't stepped forward, just stood there watching as if the world outside his porch didn't exist. Marcus tried to sound calm, but his voice cracked. "Okay, he's probably just mad we cut through his yard, that's it." But the way his shoulders hunched, I knew he didn't believe it. None of us did. Jake pulled on his hoodie strings. "Let's just go home. It's 5 minutes. 5 minutes? And we're back." So we walked, faster this time, our sneakers scuffing quick against the pavement. The neighborhood seemed different now. Every tree shadow looked like it was hiding something. Every dark porch seemed to hold a pair of eyes. My flashlight beam jittered over cracks in the sidewalk because my hand was shaking. Then Owen froze mid-step. "Guys," he whispered, pointing. A block behind us under another porch light stood the same silhouette. My mouth went dry. "He can't be that fast," Sam stammered. "He doesn't have to be fast," I muttered. "He's just there." We bolted. Bags of candy split open, Sour Patch scattering behind us. My lungs felt like fire, but the need to get home pushed me harder. We didn't stop running until Jake's backyard came into view, the sliding door, a beacon of safety. We tumbled inside, slammed it shut, pulled the curtain across. The living room looked exactly as we'd left it. Controllers scattered, soda cans lined up, the glow of the paused game on the TV. Normal. Safe. For a while, we convinced ourselves that's all it was. A man annoyed about kids in his yard. No big deal. We even laughed breathless and shaky until the adrenaline wore down. But later, after Jake's parents had long since fallen back asleep, and the five of us were sprawled in sleeping bags whispering about the night the sound came. Tap, tap, tap at the window. Sam sat up first, eyes wide. "Tell me you hear that." We all froze. Then the sound came again. Deliberate. Knuckles rapping against glass. Marcus grabbed his flashlight, hands trembling, and shone it toward the sliding back door. The beam caught something that made my stomach twist. A handprint smeared across the glass. Fresh. We screamed. We tripped over each other, scrambling up the stairs. Candy bags and blankets forgotten. My voice cracked as I shouted for Jake's parents. His dad stormed out of the bedroom in a t-shirt and boxers, clutching a baseball bat. "What the hell is going on?" "There's someone outside," Jake blurted, his face pale. His dad didn't hesitate. He charged down the stairs, bat gripped tight, and yanked the sliding door open. The night air rushed in, cool and sharp. The yard was empty. He stepped out barefoot, scanning the grass, the fence line. Nothing. No footsteps, no movement. The neighborhood hummed in silence. "Damn it," he muttered, closing the door hard enough to rattle the frame. He turned on us, eyes narrowed. "You boys are worked up on soda and scary movies. Go to sleep now." We wanted to argue, but none of us could find words. His certainty was like a wall we couldn't climb. We slunk back to our sleeping bags, our hearts still hammering, but I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made my skin crawl. I swore I heard footsteps in the grass outside, slow and circling. Once I thought I saw a shadow slip past the edge of the curtain, but when I blinked, it was gone. I told myself I was imagining it, but deep down I knew better. Weeks passed, but the memory didn't. It clung to me, surfacing at random during math class, walking home from school, lying awake at night. I couldn't shake the image of that silhouette standing under the porch light, or the handprint smeared fresh on Jake's door. Then came the news. Jake's mom was watching the evening broadcast while we were at his house again, controllers in hand. The anchor's voice cut through our laughter. Local authorities arrested a man late last night suspected of prowling residential neighborhoods. Police say he had been lurking outside homes, often targeting children's bedrooms. On his phone, officers found dozens of blurry photos of children at play, some taken through windows. We froze. The screen flashed a grainy mugshot. The man looked ordinary, too ordinary, a face you could pass in the grocery store without noticing. But then came the part that made my blood run cold. Among the images recovered were photos taken on Cedar Street. My stomach twisted. The news showed one picture: 5 boys huddled under a street lamp, plastic bags in their hands. Us. And in the background, faint but clear, stood the silhouette of a man in a doorway. After that, everything changed. Jake's parents banned sleepovers for months. Cedar Street became the road we never touched, not even in daylight. If we had to bike past it, we pedaled fast, eyes locked ahead. None of us talked much about that night, but it left a mark. For me, it was the first time I understood the world wasn't as safe as it looked. I stopped leaving windows open at night. I checked the locks 3 times before bed. Sometimes when I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and the house was quiet, I swore I could hear tapping, soft and deliberate like knuckles on glass. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination. But sometimes, when I passed by a porch at night and saw the shape of a man in shadow, my chest would seize up and I'd be 12 again, clutching a bag of candy, trying not to cry. We never saw him again, not in person. But seeing his face on the news, knowing what he'd been doing, what could have happened, that was enough. I think we got lucky. Stupid, reckless, and lucky. Danger doesn't always look like monsters from scary movies. Sometimes it looks like a porch light snapping on, or footsteps that never hurry, or an ordinary man who notices kids when no one else does. We thought sneaking out was harmless, just a game. But trust me, one reckless choice can change everything. Safety isn't something to take for granted, and courage isn't about proving you're not afraid. Sometimes it's about knowing when to stay home. I grew up in a town where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. The kind of place where parents let kids ride bikes past dark, where everyone knew who lived on every corner, and where the scariest thing you worried about was getting caught sneaking an extra cookie before dinner. Summers felt endless back then, a blur of bike rides, swimming at the quarry, and sleepovers that turned into half-remembered dares. Jake's birthday was the crown event of every summer. His parents went all out. Not because they had money, but because they loved making it feel special. They'd rent stacks of movies from the video store, order pizzas big enough to feed a small army, and let us take over their backyard like it was our own kingdom. That year, we begged them to let us set up a tent outside so we could camp out. To our surprise, they said yes. It was me, Jake, Tyler, and Chris. 4 boys at the age where we were too old for kid stuff, but not quite old enough for girls, cars, or real parties. The tent was huge, a borrowed family tent with room for all our sleeping bags, snacks, and flashlights. We thought we were tough sleeping outside, but really, we were 10 feet from the back door. The night started like every other sleepover. We roasted marshmallows on the fire pit, dared each other to eat too many hot Cheetos, and tried to outdo one another with jokes. Jake's dad stuck around until the fire burned low, then reminded us not to get too loud before heading inside. That was when things started to shift. By midnight, the sugar had us wired. The movies we brought felt boring, and even video games couldn't hold our attention. That was when Chris, always the one to stir things up, grinned and said, "Let's play hide and seek." In the dark. At first we laughed. The yard wasn't small. There was the old shed in the back corner, a tree line running along the fence, and patches of tall grass that brushed your knees. Plenty of shadows. The perfect mix of scary and exciting. Jake rolled his eyes but agreed to count first, pressing his hands over his face. 1, 2, 3, he called. The rest of us scattered. My heart pounded like this was more than a game. I ducked low near the tree line, leaves tickling my neck. Tyler bolted behind the grill, and Chris belly-flopped into the grass by the fence. Mason, who hadn't been invited to many sleepovers before that summer, slipped behind the shed. 18, 19, 20. Ready or not, Jake's flashlight cut through the yard, sweeping like a lighthouse beam. He found Tyler first, who gave himself away giggling. Then Mason sneezed, and the game was basically over. Jake swung his flashlight toward the fence line and shouted, "Found you, Chris." The beam landed on a crouched figure in the grass. But Chris didn't move. Didn't laugh, didn't complain about being caught. "Dude, come on," Jake said, walking closer. That was when the figure stood. Slowly. Too tall. Too broad. My stomach dropped. This wasn't Chris. The man bolted, vaulting, the fence with a speed that made the air shift. Jake screamed, high-pitched and raw, and the rest of us rushed toward him. Chris popped up from the opposite side of the yard, pale and wide-eyed. "What happened?" he asked, but then he saw Jake's face. There was someone else. Jake whispered. That was the first time the night went from fun to something I'd never forget. We didn't wait around. We bolted for the sliding door, shoving past each other, our sleeping bags dragging in the grass. My legs felt like jelly as I slammed the door shut and locked it, heart rattling in my chest. Jake's dad came downstairs in his t-shirt, rubbing his eyes. "What's going on? Why are you all screaming like maniacs?" "There was someone in the yard," Jake cried. His dad frowned. "Probably just a neighbor cutting through." "No," I insisted. My voice cracked, but I pushed through it. He was standing right there by the fence. Then he just ran. He wasn't one of us. Jake's dad sighed like we'd been watching too many scary movies. Still, he grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside barefoot, the beam sweeping across the yard. We pressed against the glass, desperate to see what he'd find. But the shed, the trees, the fence, it was all empty. "Nothing out here," he said, stepping back in. "Probably some teenager messing around. Don't let it ruin your night." We tried to act normal after that, piling back into the tent with our snacks. But the game was over, and so was the laughter. We whispered about what we saw, replaying every detail. Tyler swore the man had been watching Chris. Mason swore he heard the crunch of boots even before Jake screamed. Chris tried to laugh it off, but his voice wavered. By 2 a.m., exhaustion took over. One by one, they dozed off. But I couldn't. Every creak of the tent fabric made me twitch. The shadows beyond the mesh walls felt too alive. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a scare. But deep down, I didn't believe it. And then, Mason stirred. I saw him sit up slowly, his face pale in the flashlight glow. He pressed his ear to the mesh like he was listening. "What is it?" I whispered. His eyes widened, finger pressed to his lips. Then he mouthed the word. Footsteps. We froze, the silence heavy enough to choke us. The crunch of leaves came faintly from the far end of the yard. Mason peeked through the mesh, then sucked in a sharp breath. He didn't scream. He just backed away, eyes huge. "The same guy," he whispered. "He's just standing there, watching." The rest of that night blurred into fragments. None of us wanted to look, but Mason swore he saw the man by the fence for nearly an hour, unmoving, just facing the tent. We tried to convince ourselves it wasn't real, that maybe Mason was half dreaming. But when morning came and the dew was still on the grass, Jake's dad walked the yard with us, trailing behind. That's when we found them. Muddy boot prints, leading from the far corner of the yard right up to the tent. No one spoke. The prints were proof, carved into the ground, undeniable. Jake's dad's face went tight, but he tried to play it down. "Could be from the delivery guy yesterday," he said too quickly. "Don't make a big deal out of it." But we knew better. We never slept in that tent again. That summer, every sound outside the window made my heart lurch. We didn't talk about it at school. It was like we made a silent pact. Don't bring it up, don't give it more power. But the memory clung, heavy and sharp. Years passed and life moved on. The sleepovers turned into basketball practice, then into high school parties. The four of us drifted in and out of each other's lives, busy with our own problems. But sometimes, when I lay awake at night, I could still see the silhouette standing by the fence. And then Mason got the letter. It was sophomore year when Mason told me. We were standing by our lockers, the morning noise of the hallway buzzing around us. His face was pale, eyes darting like he couldn't focus. He slipped me a folded piece of paper. "No envelope," he whispered. "Found it in my locker this morning." I unfolded it. My hands went cold. One line, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "I still watch." No name, no explanation. Just that. We stared at each other, stomachs sinking. The hallway chatter seemed too loud, too normal. I shoved the note into my pocket before anyone else could see. "You told anyone?" I asked. He shook his head. Who would believe me? We skipped class that day, sitting behind the bleachers with the note between us like it might burn a hole in the concrete. We tried to rationalize. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone overheard us talking years ago. But deep down, I knew the man hadn't forgotten. The years blurred after that, but the shadow of that night never really left. Sometimes late at night, my phone would buzz with an unknown number. I never picked up, but when I checked the voicemails, I'd hear nothing but silence. And once, what sounded like slow breathing. Jake moved out of town after high school. Tyler joined the army. Mason stayed, but he got quiet, withdrawn. None of us wanted to say it out loud, but we all carried the same fear, that the man from the fence wasn't gone, that he was still out there somewhere close. Looking back, I think about how young we were, just kids laughing too loud, thinking the world was safe. We thought monsters were in movies, but the real monster had muddy boots, broad shoulders, and the patience to stand and watch. I don't sleep outside anymore, and I lock every window. But sometimes when the wind shifts at night, I swear I can feel eyes on me. Because maybe once someone starts watching, they never really stop. People often say childhood is a blur, that most memories dissolve into fragments. Faces at a kitchen table, the smell of cut grass, the glow of a birthday candle. But some nights burn themselves into you so deeply that decades later you can still hear the sound of the air in the room, still feel the weight of a silence you didn't understand. That Saturday night when my mother disappeared was one of those nights for me. I was 12 then, awkward and restless, living in a 2-story house on the edge of town where the woods pressed against the backyard. My dad traveled for work, so Mom carried the weight of both parents most of the time. She worked at the pharmacy, cooked dinners that were rarely more than pasta or grilled cheese, and still managed to keep the lights on. She wasn't perfect. She snapped when she was tired and worried too much about bills, but she was steady, solid, or at least she had been until that night. It started like any other sleepover. My best friends Mason and Owen were sprawled across the living room floor with me, game controllers in our hands, a mountain of chips and soda cans between us. The air buzzed with laughter and shouts, our voices bouncing off the walls while Mom leaned on the kitchen doorway with that half-smile she wore when she was both amused and tired. Around 10 o'clock, the chip bags were empty and the soda gone. She sighed, grabbed her purse, and jingled her keys. "All right, I'll run to the store before everything closes," she said. "Don't burn the house down while I'm gone." "Grab gummy worms," Mason called. "And Mountain Dew," Owen added, his eyes still glued to the screen. I grinned, embarrassed at how she treated us like little kids, but secretly glad for it too. She winked at me before stepping out into the night. The minivan headlights swept across the living room curtains, then disappeared down the street. We turned back to the game, the sound of gunfire and explosions filling the room, and time slipped away. By 11, Mason finally glanced at the clock. "Dude, shouldn't she be back by now?" I shrugged, trying to sound calm. Probably a line, or she ran into someone she knows. Inside, though, my stomach tightened. My mom wasn't late. Not like this. By midnight, the game had gone silent. We sat in the dim light of the TV, the weight of unease pressing on all of us. I called her cell, straight to voicemail. I tried Dad, though I knew he was on a flight. Nothing. The house felt too big, too quiet. The hum of the refrigerator suddenly loud. Then came the crunch of tires on gravel. We rushed to the window as headlights swept across the curtains again. Relief hit me so hard I laughed. The van had returned at last, but when the engine cut off, no door opened, no footsteps, no jingling keys in the lock. 1 minute passed, then 5, then 10. "Why isn't she coming in?" Owen whispered. I couldn't take it. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and pulled the curtain back. My breath caught. The driveway was empty. No van, no tire tracks, nothing. We panicked, phones in hand, dialing her number again and again. At 3 a.m., the landline rang. The sound ripped through the silence. I snatched it up, my hand shaking. "Mom?" I cried. Static hissed. Then her voice came faint, trembling. "Don't open the door." The line went dead. That was the moment. Everything changed. The police came the next morning after the neighbor found Mom's van 2 towns over. The engine was cold. The doors locked. No sign of her. I sat at the kitchen table with Mason and Owen beside me, their faces pale as officers walked through the house asking questions. I was exhausted, my eyes burning from staying awake all night, replaying that phone call in my head. "What exactly did she say?" one of them asked, leaning close. She said, "Don't open the door," I whispered. Then it cut out. He scribbled in his notebook, his face unreadable. "Did you hear anything else? Voices, noise?" "No, just static." The other officer asked about the van. I told him we saw headlights, heard the engine, but when I looked, the driveway was empty. He exchanged a glance with his partner, the kind that told me they didn't believe a word of it. Kids, they probably thought. Too much imagination. They interviewed Mason and Owen, too. Mason backed me up, nervous but steady. Owen, though, hesitated. He looked down at his shoes, then at the officer. I saw someone, he muttered. In the passenger seat. The room went still. My chest tightened. What are you talking about? When the van pulled in, Owen whispered. I saw someone sitting next to her. I thought it was your dad at first, but... His voice cracked. It wasn't. The officer leaned forward. What did he look like? Owen shook his head. I don't know, just someone. I only saw a shadow. They wrote it down, but I could tell they didn't take it seriously. By the time they left, the weight of doubt hung in the air. My friend's parents came to pick them up, hugging me awkwardly, murmuring about how sorry they were. Then I was alone in the house, staring at the phone, waiting for it to ring again. Days turned into weeks. Search parties combed the woods. Flyers with her face went up around town. The police called it a missing persons case, but whispered words like foul play when they thought I couldn't hear. Dad flew home, his face hollow, his voice strained. He told me to stay strong, but his hands trembled every time the phone rang. We were both pretending. What haunted me most wasn't just her disappearance. It was the sound of her voice on the phone, the fear in it, the warning. Don't open the door. But which door had she meant? Months passed and life became a series of routines designed to cover the void. I went to school, came home, ate whatever takeout Dad brought, and lay awake at night listening to the creaks of the house. People stopped asking questions. Neighbors stopped dropping off casseroles. Eventually, the world moved on. Everyone but me. I clung to scraps. The voicemail that had never recorded, the van locked and abandoned, Owen's whisper about the passenger seat. I replayed it all like a puzzle with missing pieces. Mason stopped coming over, unable to handle the heaviness. Owen avoided me altogether, as if speaking about that shadow had cursed him. One night, unable to sleep, I crept downstairs. The air smelled faintly of dust and old wood. I sat in the dark living room staring at the front door. My heart pounded as I whispered into the silence. Mom? The house gave no answer, but something in me swore she was still out there, trapped or hiding, waiting for me to understand. The years blurred after that. High school, graduation, moving away. Dad sold the house. I carried the memory like a stone in my pocket. Always there, always heavy. People assumed she was dead. I never did. I couldn't. I was 22 when Owen finally spoke about that night again. We ran into each other at a gas station, both of us older, wearier. He hesitated before walking over. His voice was low, almost ashamed. I need to tell you something. We sat in his car, the air thick with gasoline and silence. His hands gripped the wheel even though the engine was off. That night, he said, I didn't just see someone in the passenger seat. I saw him turn his head. He was looking straight at us. Chills ran through me. Why didn't you say that? I was scared, Owen admitted. And when the cops didn't believe us, I figured it didn't matter. But it's haunted me, Tyler. His face, not clear, just watching. I stared at him, the old fear roaring back. For years, I'd convinced myself maybe we imagined it. Maybe stress had twisted our minds. But hearing him now, I knew. It had been real. Mom hadn't been alone. 10 more years have passed since then. They never found her. No suspects, no answers. Just a hole in the world where my mother used to be. I built a life. I work. I pay bills. I laugh sometimes. But that night is stitched into me. I can't look at a driveway with headlights without feeling my chest tighten. Sometimes late at night I still hear her voice. Don't open the door. I wonder if she was warning me about that very moment when someone sat beside her in the van. Or if she was warning me about the years after, about letting the fear of what we don't know hollow us out. I'll never know for sure. But I've learned to live with the silence, to hold the memory of her as more than just her disappearance. She was a mother who loved me enough to make sure I didn't burn the house down, even in her last words. The story of that night has stayed with me not as a ghost story, but as a reminder of how fragile the threads of life are. We believe our parents will always come back, that the ordinary routines, running to the store, locking the door, are unshakable. But safety is not guaranteed, and sometimes the people we love vanish without answers. Cherish the presence of the people you love, listen to your instincts, and never ignore the warnings that fear whispers. Life is fragile, and every ordinary moment is more precious than we realize. People like to say every town has that house, the one kids whisper about when they ride their bikes past, the one you speed up walking by when the streetlights flicker on at dusk. For our neighborhood, that house sat across from my best friend Chris's. His family had the nicest place on our block, a 2-story colonial with a wide front porch and a big oak tree in the yard. But across the street loomed the dark, sagging place with its curtains always drawn. We never saw the guy who lived there, not really. Sometimes you'd catch a shadow behind the blinds, but that was it. Nobody mowed his lawn, and weeds grew thick around the porch steps. Old man Halpern, who lived 2 doors down, swore he'd once seen the neighbor dragging heavy trash bags out at 3 a.m. He claimed he smelled something foul. To a bunch of 12-year-old boys, that was enough to turn mystery into legend. The night everything happened was supposed to be harmless. Just a sleepover, pizza, soda, and video games. Chris's parents were the kind who didn't hover. His mom stayed upstairs with a book, and his dad fell asleep in front of the TV by 9. That gave us free reign in the basement, which had an old couch, beanbags, and a flat screen hooked to Chris's Xbox. There were 5 of us that night. Me, Chris, Jake, Mason, and Tyler. We'd spent the whole evening screaming into our headsets, blasting away on Call of Duty, daring each other to eat spoonfuls of hot sauce and laughing until our throats hurt. Around 11, the game wound down. We sprawled across our sleeping bags, restless, searching for the next thrill. Truth or dare, Mason suggested, his grin already trouble. Boring, Jake shot back. We're not girls at a birthday party. Fine, Mason said. Then let's do it. Let's spy on the neighbor. The room went quiet. Even Tyler, who usually rolled his eyes at Mason's dumb ideas, looked uneasy. Don't start that again, Chris muttered. My mom says he's just private. Private, my ass, Mason said. Dude's probably got bodies in the basement. We all laughed, but it was that nervous kind of laugh. The kind that masks how close someone's words come to the truth you've already imagined. Fueled by too much soda and the bravado of being together, we went upstairs. Chris's bedroom had the perfect view of the street. We killed the lights, pressed to the window, and Mason dug out an old pair of binoculars from Chris's closet. First, there was nothing. The house sat in darkness, still as always. I almost felt silly staring at it like we were kids playing detective. But then a flicker of light snapped on in the kitchen. Look, look, Chris hissed. Through a gap in the curtain we saw him, a tall man standing at the counter, his posture stiff. He didn't move, didn't fidget, didn't do anything but stand there for what felt like minutes. Then, as if he'd felt our eyes, he turned his head, straight toward our window. We all ducked to the floor, hearts pounding. No way he saw us, Tyler whispered. Dude, Chris said, his voice shaky. He looked right at us. When we finally dared to peek again, the light was gone. Curtains drawn tight. We tried to laugh it off, but the mood had shifted. Back in the basement, the TV glowed with soldiers sprinting across a battlefield, but none of us yelled anymore. Every creak of the house seemed louder, every shadow in the corner sharper. Around 1:30, just as I was drifting between sleep and wakefulness, came a knock at the front door. 3 slow raps. We froze. No one moved, Chris whispered. Don't answer it. The knock came again, harder this time. We waited, straining to hear footsteps, a car engine, anything. Nothing. Just silence. After 10 agonizing minutes, we convinced ourselves it had been a prank, maybe a drunk delivery driver. Slowly, the tension eased. The others drifted back to their sleeping bags. But I couldn't sleep. Facing the small basement window near the ceiling, I kept telling myself I'd imagined it. Then I saw it. A faint outline of a face pressed against the glass, watching. My throat closed up. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I just squeezed my eyes shut and prayed for morning. By daylight, it almost felt like a dream. Chris's parents made pancakes, the house buzzed with normalcy, but as we cleaned up, Mason froze at the upstairs window. "Guys," he whispered. We crowded around. On the ledge outside were muddy fingerprints, long smudges where someone had leaned in. We didn't tell Chris's parents. I don't know why. Maybe we thought they wouldn't believe us, or worse, that they'd tell our parents we were making up stories. Instead, we swore to keep it between us. But the neighbor's house wasn't the same after that. Every time I biked past, I felt his eyes. Sometimes I swore I saw the curtain twitch. A week later, I was walking home from school alone. The autumn sun dipped low, painting the sky orange. When I passed his driveway, I heard it, a soft scrape, like metal dragging on concrete. I glanced over. The garage door was cracked just enough to see boots shifting inside. I hurried past, my pulse racing. That night, I got a text from Jake. He was outside my house. Swear to God. Just standing there. None of us slept easy anymore. It came to a head 2 Fridays later. Another sleepover, this time smaller. Just me, Chris, and Jake. Around midnight, while Chris dozed off, Jake nudged me. "Look," he whispered, pointing to the window. Across the street, the neighbor's porch light flickered on. A figure stood there, staring straight at us. I grabbed the binoculars with trembling hands. The man was tall, gaunt, his face pale under the light, and he was smiling. Jake yanked the blinds shut. "We need to tell someone," he said. But before we could move, a sound rattled from the basement window. A scrape, then the faint squeak of metal against glass. "He's trying to get in," Jake hissed. We bolted upstairs, slamming Chris's bedroom door and locking it. For an hour, we sat in silence, every muscle tight until the creaks below finally stopped. In the morning, Chris's dad found the basement window screen pried loose. This time, we told. Chris's dad called the police, who arrived in squad cars, their radios crackling. They searched the neighbor's house for the first time we saw inside. It wasn't bodies in the basement. No blood, no horror movie nightmare. Just a reclusive man, walls stacked with newspapers, dishes crusted in the sink. But in his living room, facing the window, sat a chair, binoculars resting on the sill. He admitted nothing. The cops said he hadn't broken any laws, at least not ones they could prove. But Chris's parents weren't taking chances. They installed cameras, extra locks, and made sure none of us went outside after dark. I still dream about that face at the basement window, the way he smiled under the porch light. He didn't need to break in to haunt me. He already had. Curiosity is natural, especially when you're young, but sometimes poking into other people's shadows invites something you can't control. The neighbor wasn't a monster from a storybook. He was real, and his danger came from obsession and secrecy. The lesson is simple. Respect boundaries, trust your instincts, and speak up when something feels wrong. Silence and fear only give power to the ones who mean harm. I've always thought birthdays say a lot about a person. Some kids throw wild parties, fill the backyard with balloons and cousins and chaos. Others, like me, keep it small, controlled. A circle of people you know won't ruin the vibe. My 15th birthday was supposed to be just that. Cozy, harmless fun. It was the first year my parents allowed me to invite boys. Not just any boys, only the ones they trusted. Daniel, of course, because he lived next door and had known me since kindergarten, plus 2 other friends from school. The rest were girls I'd grown up with, the ones who'd been to almost every birthday I'd ever had. The living room was a disaster zone by midnight. Sleeping bags stretched wall to wall, pillows scattered, chip bags empty on the coffee table. A horror movie flickered on the TV, but nobody was paying attention anymore. We were in that strange hour of the night where laughter came too easily, and everything felt both endless and fleeting. One by one, people drifted off. The soda crash hit, the sugar high died, and soon the floor was a sprawl of half-asleep bodies, except for me and Daniel. We lay in our sleeping bags, side by side, whispering. It started with dumb stuff, Teachers we hated, rumors about people, at school which songs we couldn't stop listening to. But like most late-night talks, it edged into something quieter, softer. "Can I tell you something?" Daniel whispered, his voice low, careful not to wake anyone. "Yeah," I said, rolling onto my side to face him. "You're actually my crush." I froze. My stomach flipped. Then I laughed softly, not mocking, just nervous, my hand covering my face. "You're such an idiot." But the moment didn't feel bad. It felt warm, exciting, like something had shifted between us. Then the lights flickered. I sat up fast. "Storm?" "No storm tonight," Daniel said. He propped himself on his elbow, glancing toward the window. The street outside was calm, no rain, no wind. The TV went black. The Wi-Fi router lights died. "Power outage," I whispered. But before Daniel could answer, a voice drifted from the dark hallway. Low, drawn out. A whisper that made my skin crawl. "I like you too, Emma." My chest seized. Daniel's eyes widened. That wasn't me. We clutched each other's hands instinctively. And in that moment, surrounded by sleeping friends, I knew something was terribly wrong in my own house. At first, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe my brain had twisted Daniel's voice into something else. But the look on his face told me he'd heard it too. "Wake them up," I whispered, shaking my closest friend, Megan, until she stirred. Her hair was a tangled mess, her eyes half shut. "What's going on?" she mumbled, but then everyone heard it. Footsteps in the kitchen. Slow, deliberate, heavy enough that the wood creaked beneath them. "Your dad?" one of the boys asked, his voice cracking. "No," I said quickly. "He's working tonight, and my mom's upstairs." The room shifted from groggy confusion to sheer panic. Nobody wanted to admit it, but we all felt it. Someone was in the house who shouldn't be. Daniel grabbed the lamp from the side table, clutching it like a bat. His hand was shaking, but he stood in front of me anyway. "Stay with me," he whispered. I nodded, my throat tight. We crept toward the kitchen together, the group trailing behind like scared shadows. Every light in the house was out, but the fridge cast its pale glow across the tiles. It was enough to see the door, and the mark on it. A single wet handprint, too large to be any of ours. Nobody spoke. We just stood there, staring at that handprint like it was proof of some nightmare. "Come alive." Daniel shifted closer to me. I could feel his hand trembling in mine. For once, I didn't care how scared I looked, because fear was all I had. The police didn't find anything. That was the part that messed me up most. No forced entry, no open windows, no footprints in the yard. Nothing but a group of terrified teenagers and one wet handprint on the fridge. My mom tried to explain it away. "Maybe one of you touched it after washing your hands." But we hadn't. We knew we hadn't. And the way the voice had repeated Daniel's words, that wasn't a coincidence. For weeks I couldn't sleep right. Every creak of the house pulled me out of dreams. Every hum of the fridge made me stiffen. But worse than the sounds were the whispers. At first, I thought they were dreams. I'd wake up with my heart racing, sure I'd heard it again. "I like you too, Emma." But then came the touch. One night lying in bed, I felt it, fingers brushing mine under the blanket like someone trying to hold my hand. I yanked it away so fast I nearly rolled off the bed. My room was empty. My door was locked. I told no one. Not even Daniel. Especially not Daniel. Things between us changed after that night. We never talked about what he said or what the voice repeated, but something unspoken hovered between us like static in the air. One afternoon after school, we sat on my porch steps, the autumn air crisp and cool. "Do you still hear it?" Daniel asked suddenly. I froze. "What?" The voice. My throat tightened. I hadn't told him. "You hear it too?" He nodded, staring at the ground. "At night. Sometimes it says other things. Stuff I've said to you." My stomach twisted. It wasn't just me. From then on, we stuck closer together. We studied at each other's houses, walked home side by side, but the whispers didn't stop. If anything, they grew bolder. A laugh in the corner of the room, a word murmured from the back seat of the car, always low, always mocking, always just out of reach. The last time I heard it, I was alone in the living room. Everyone was upstairs. The clock read midnight. I had tried to distract myself with a book, but my eyes were heavy. That was when it came, clear as ever. Hold my hand, Emma. The lamp beside me flickered. My breath came shallow, and then I felt it. The unmistakable pressure of fingers sliding between mine, though no one was there. I screamed, bolting upstairs to my mom's room. For once I told her everything. Not just the whispers, but the handprints, the touches, the way it mimicked Daniel. She listened, really listened, and for the first time, she believed me. The next day she called a priest, though we weren't even religious. He blessed the house, prayed in every room, burned incense until the air felt heavy. After that, the whispers stopped. Not overnight, not completely, but they faded until one day I realized I hadn't heard them in weeks. But sometimes, when Daniel and I walk home together, I still feel it, the phantom brush of a hand against mine. Like something is waiting, watching, just patient enough to strike again. Danger doesn't always kick down doors or break windows. Sometimes it slips in quietly, hides in the dark, and makes you doubt yourself until you're too scared to speak. But silence gives fear power. If something feels wrong, if the shadows seem too close, tell someone. Trust your instincts. Fear is easier to face when it isn't yours alone.